is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele. Guest tonight is Bill Jacoby. He's a volunteer with AE 9/11 Truth. He's been on the show before. Tonight he's talking about the local action groups team, getting things organized and structured so that we have more volunteer opportunities for you out there in the listening audience, so that more people all across America and eventually the world will have the chance to participate in one of the biggest issues, I think, in American history, and be able to take part in that history by exposing the crime of the century, the crime we talk about every week on this show, the destruction of Towers 1, 2, and 7 of the World Trade Center complex, and the cover-up of the evidence proving that those buildings were brought down in controlled demolitions that day. Bill's yet another fascinating guest. I know you guys are going to enjoy listening to him. This is a long interview, so I'm going to be playing that for you in just a moment or so. Before I do play that interview, though, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take our 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families, and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. That 10 seconds of silence will start now. And that is 10 seconds. William Jacoby is an attorney. He was admitted to the Bar of New York. He's now retired. He spent most of his life in management positions in the nonprofit, public, and private sectors. He was executive director of a community development corporation in East Harlem. He was president of 2 renewable energy startups. He was chief counsel for a municipal community development agency and director of a rural development project in Peru and Bolivia, where he had served in the Peace Corps many years ago. He has a Master's of Public Administration degree from the University of Pittsburgh. He's got a JD from Duquesne Law School and a BA in Government from Dartmouth College. William, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you, Andy, for inviting me.
Now, briefly fill in anything I left out there, and just for my own personal curiosity, because I was in the Peace Corps, what kind of stuff did you do in the Peace Corps outside of that description I just gave?
Yeah, I was an urban community development worker, so I learned a lot about community organizing there, lessons which I think the Peruvians had a lot to teach us, so I'm hopefully doing a little south to north technical assistance these days.
Well, you've got a lot to bring to the table with your resume. Like I said, you're an attorney. You've been involved in running nonprofits. You know a lot about organizing people. And, of course, that's very germane to what we'll be talking about. You were on the show last year to talk about the lawyers group you're a part of. That's still functioning strong, still doing a lot of work. And now you're making AE 9/11 Truth stronger, building our volunteer infrastructure. I want our audience to hear about this so that those who are interested and want to help out, may not know how to help out, can contact us and get to be a part of what you're doing. So tell us what you're doing. Tell us more about this local action group organizational structure you're making.
Okay, Eddie. Richard Gage asked me to help serve as team leader for the Action Groups Network, which has existed within Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth for some years. But it consisted of isolated or discrete local groups, and the organization was not funded to provide staff support to a broad network like that. Still not funded to support that kind of staff, so we are trying to see what can be done to make that system stronger, more resilient, and to grow, and to do this on a volunteer basis. So I have encouraged the organization to form a regional network of regional coordinators who are now busy recruiting state coordinators, and we expect to continue down the ladder to districts and to local action groups. The purpose of that structure is to make it possible to coordinate and manage a network of volunteers in a fashion that's not incompatible with, well, being a volunteer, leading a normal life, so that we can get a broad cross-section of Americans involved in this kind of an organization. Why to do it, and what are we hoping to achieve by all of this? Well, I guess one way to answer that is to contrast the enormous success that Architects and Engineers has had over its life of about, 8 or 9 years now, I think, in educating people about this phenomenon, about the history of 9/11, what actually happened on that day, with a focus on what's demonstrable scientifically at the World Trade Center. And the outreach that has been achieved and the education that has been achieved is phenomenal. And yet we continue to be frustrated by the lack of a response from both the mass media and from the political world. So this is an effort to learn from the experience the organization has had. I think the assumption, which was a reasonable assumption to make, was that the truth by itself would overcome all obstacles. At some level, we believe that the truth will overcome all obstacles, but in the short run, we see strange anomalies to that. We see, for example, the study director of NIST saying there's no evidence of steel girders that were affected by heat, and there's a photograph of him standing in front of a steel beam distorted by heat, and we hear him talking about how they have no evidence of explosions, and then we read a New York Times file of 118 interviews with firemen saying they all heard explosions, and then we find that we can put an electronic billboard in Times Square within sight of the New York Times building. Well, that's really two things: a billboard in front of the New York Times building, and the New York Times still refuses to cover this kind of news. So we're seeing that while the truth will find its way, it seems to be getting sidetracked in some strange ways. So a little organizing may be required. So that's what prompts us to do this. And I want to contrast, or talk about how these two things, the education and the organizing, go hand in hand. I often joke with Richard Gage that I think half the country has figured out that the official version of what happened on 9/11 is, well, let's look for a good euphemism, is not something you can rely on, but that almost everybody who has those doubts thinks that they must feel as though they're about the only ones who feel that way, because we have been subjected to a lot of fairly deliberate propaganda, I think, about how that's conspiracy thinking, and proper ladies and gentlemen don't think such nasty thoughts. So there's a need to try to factor in what we have learned about how that fear-mongering has worked on us and figure out ways to overcome it. But just in terms of the outreach that's been done, when you look at the number of people on the Architects and Engineers supporters list, there are on average, about 100 people for every congressional district in the country. Now, that's not just the number that would vote if this was on the ballot. These are organizers, people who have taken the trouble to sign petitions and to go out of their way to seek information. In addition, there are about 5 times that number people who have friended Architects and Engineers on its Facebook page. And there are almost double that number of people who have heard the hour-long interview that Richard Gage gave on C-SPAN, and the number of people who downloaded that talk, which is about 400,000, makes it the fourth most or fifth most listened to C-SPAN broadcast since they started archiving their programs back in about 1978 or 79. You would think that's quite a bit of coverage, and you would think that it would have brought about mass media coverage. And strangely, something that ranked so high in the C-SPAN rankings is peculiarly absent from the mass media. So, but with those kinds of numbers, we know that if we want to organize around the country and build local action groups, that we aren't really starting from scratch. There are at least 1,000 people on average in every congressional district who have done something overt to educate themselves and to express their dissent on this issue. But there is a contrast between what those statistics show us about education and involvement, and our presence on the ground, in the streets, and in our congressional leaders' offices. So that's what we're hoping to turn around. And the strong news for those of you who are listening to this who are angry that our voice on these issues is not being heard is that you are not alone. Work has been done. There are people out there who know what the score is and really are, I think, yearning for some opportunity to come together and make their voices felt. They are certainly not finding that voice through the political parties. They're not finding it in the mass media. But it's a distortion that those things have occurred, that those situations exist, and it's within our power to change that.
Now, can you please describe how this organization of these local action groups is going to be structured?
The most important level is, or will be, because we're examining it from the top down at the moment, and in order to make sure that in the future it is not top down, I'll get into that later. But the bedrock of this will be local action groups. There's no strict bylaws or requirements. The groups will actually not be affiliated with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. They are people who, in most cases, are awakened by the educational work of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. But the purpose of these groups is and will be to do three things, basically. Number one, to be an entry point for people who are brought in through our outreach efforts, such as what has been going on for the past years, and who are encouraged to come to a regular monthly meeting where, for new arrivals, you might say, where there will be a screening of one of the Architects and Engineers videos about the destruction of the World Trade Center, in which prominent architects and engineers narrate and explain the evidence of that day. The goal then is for, following that screening, to have some interaction, almost a discussion about what this means to the individual and to the country. And then the goal then is to ask of this first-time viewer of these materials, or perhaps second-time viewer, to consider coming to monthly meetings to continue his education into what this means, what this event means for our history. By education, I mean other videos may be shown, discussions with fellow citizens from the area, and this local action group will, as its name implies, become a place where people can ask themselves and ask one another, what can we do about this? And a lot of the answers to that will come from them. Certainly what Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has been advocating for some years now is for people to sign a petition calling for a new and independent investigation, and that will remain a constant, and we would expect from this organizing effort to see many more people sign that petition. As I mentioned, we have a supporters list of about 50,000 already, and that number is growing really weekly. So that's really what the local action group is for. As to the larger activities that it will undertake, one thing that we've undertaken up till now is to start reaching out to our congressmen to encourage them to read the 28 pages, not because we think that this is a full explanation of everything we need to know about that day, but because it has been kept secret, and there is a move in Congress now to make it not secret, and we think declassifying things is a good first step for us en route to 9/11 truth. So those are some tangible things that we hope to do. Educate more people, help them along the way through self-directed education, and Architects and Engineers really doesn't have a curriculum or a set of explanations for everything that's wrong in the universe or everything that happened on 9/11 truth. It has a limited insight into, an insight on certain key points, which in a nutshell can be said to revolve around the fact that the buildings obviously could not have fallen simply because of the impact of planes hitting them or office fires. But the opening of these questions is very unsettling to anyone who encounters this fact for the first time. It has been unsettling to all of us who have experienced this. And we have found that to discover this in isolation from other people is very difficult for many people to cope with. So we think that creating these groups will be important for newcomers to the movement and oldcomers, for that matter, to digest this and to examine and reflect upon how this changes their worldview, changes how they understand the country and our place in it and our place in the world, and just start a process of new discovery and consensus building, which is necessary because of all of the suppression of information that has taken place over the years on this. So just quickly to complete the organizational idea, the core functionality of this, you could say, would be small groups, maybe 2 people, 3 people, 5 people meeting in a diner in their local town. Those groups can grow and proliferate and create new ones. We will look for district coordinators who will provide some support and counseling for those who are trying to initiate new local action groups in towns where where there's no activity yet. We will have state coordinators who will organize and oversee or manage or support, mentor a statewide committee of these district and local groups. And then there, as I mentioned, there are 8 regions that have been set up in the country with about 40 million population in each, so that they range in size from 2 states to 10 states, depending on the population of the respective states. And the goal is for these that whole integrated structure from local action groups on up to eventually, as soon as possible, to become democratic in nature so that influence and leadership flows from the bottom to the top. Initially, we have no choice but to do it the other way around, and we've got some really remarkable people busy now identifying state coordinators who in turn will have the job of organizing down at the more local levels. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth will make available its supporters lists on a very careful and restricted basis for that work. And there's an elaborate procedure to make sure that that's done in a careful and responsible way. But at the end of the day, we expect to have a representative structure with a broad base of participation and one which is capable of being managed, I guess is the best word, coordinated by volunteers. So it will be, among other things, a great empowerment opportunity for many people who have not been involved in anything civic for a while. It will be a leadership development opportunity because it will require many people to step up and do things that they didn't realize that they were capable of doing before. But it will also be a wonderful opportunity for Americans to come together and meet one another the way we envisioned, I think the country envisioned with our old New England town meetings years ago. This was how people would meet and resolve different points of view and come together and make democracy function at the local level. So that's kind of how it would work. Now, I don't mean to make this seem too as if it's a snap. It's going to be a snap to do this. It's going to be very difficult. A lot has been written. The book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam comes to mind as one example, which decries the gradual decline in American civic life, in voluntarism, over the past, quite a few decades now. The title of his book, Bowling Alone, was referencing the fact that even something as innocuous as bowling leagues have declined in participation over the decades as one-wage earner families were replaced by two-wage earner families, and then with all the unemployment and the insecurity, people have lost a great deal of their capability for their time for civic life. And if that was true for bowling leagues, it's certainly also true for school boards and church groups and political participation and many other things. It makes you wonder how whether all this was simply accidental or whether it was contrived, because we now find ourselves as citizens atomized, with many people expressing dissatisfaction about our political system and no one finding a place to turn for real alternatives, and everyone seeing that the choice of alternatives is being manipulated, whether by money, by media, or who knows what. So it's not an easy thing to tell Americans right now that they need to rebuild a civic network. It may be an impossible thing to ask of them. But if you were to read some of the comments that people wrote when they signed the Architects and Engineers petition, and I've been privileged to have that opportunity, you can't help but be moved by the patriotism and the frustrated civic consciousness of Americans from all states and all walks of life. And one can't help but sense that there's a deep need for us to find some way out of our private spheres into a reconstituted public sphere. And somewhere at the root of that longing is, you can analyze it a million different ways, and I don't have any crystal ball, but it has something to do with the loss of truth, the loss of confidence, the loss of faith in what we're being told, and the pursuit of truth has no clearer reflection than in the quest for truth about 9/11 and the aggressiveness with which investigation and impartial investigation has been stymied, stifled, is it goes beyond 9/11, but it starts there, and it's been used for a justification for so many things which people find unconvincing, that if we can't get to the bottom of an act which killed 3,000 people in Midtown Manhattan and in Washington, how can we get to the root of much more complex things? So in summary, I guess I would just say that the most difficult spade work has been done thanks to the work of brave people. Enough of the truth has been compiled so that it's extremely persuasive when an average person reads it or sees it. And what we need to do now, and we have a core of people who understand this need, is for us to take a little time out of our daily lives and come to a monthly meeting and reach out to other neighbors, make a few phone calls, and commit ourselves to really just the core Central American enterprise of being a democracy. So that's really what it's about. I would encourage people who are interested in this to, the one key thing you can do is go to the Architects and Engineers website and just follow the signs to sign the AE petition. And as of fairly recently, that information will be conveyed to regional coordinators, and you should be getting a call fairly soon from people thanking you for signing the petition and asking if you'd like to help with this organizing effort. And as I say, they're probably, most likely there is not a local action group in your area right now, but there is the capability to form them, and you can't look around and point the finger at someone else. It may be up to you to start it, but we can provide you with help and support in doing so, and you will find it to be a formative experience and a life-changing experience for yourself to discover what it's possible for you to do. And in so doing, you can, I think, recapture. If you've lost some faith in the country in recent years, this is a way to regain it.
I was Googling while you were talking. You mentioned that book, Bowling Alone. Is it a book or a paper? Because I found an 18-page abstract by Robert D. Putnam. Is there a larger book that can be gotten?
It is a much larger book, yeah. And the 18 pages will probably get you what you need to know about this, although Dr. Putnam may be disappointed. But it points to something much deeper in our psyche because it goes back before 9/11 occurred.
Well, I will be on Amazon later getting this thing, and people can Google and get the 18 pages, but I think that that is something that we need to study. What has gone on in this country? We're obviously a different people than we were 40 years ago. The avenues through which we used to carry information, with which we used to reach out to our neighbors and make things happen, get action to happen, to influence the decisions that take place at the highest level, seem to have been severed or weakened or diluted or something, because people have lost interest. People even who are awake to 9/11, who agree with us, who say, yeah, that's terrible, but what are you going to do? Well, there's a lot you can do. Look at the small things, or big things really, that volunteers at AE 9/11 Truth have done. Just one person or this scattered group of people here and there. Now imagine that they get organized. Imagine that they get bigger and better, which is what William is trying to do right now. Now, talking about empowerment, ideas, people, these groups getting together. Will the generation of ideas structure be bottom up, or will it kind of go both ways? How will ideas be carried out and accomplished by the individual groups, and where will the middlemen play a role?
That's a great question. We are trying. It's a conundrum in a way, but I have the answer for you. It's a challenge. A lot of people want to know, well, what exactly are you going to do before I join this thing? So on the one hand, there's an impulse to lay out an elaborate plan. Well, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing down to 40 pages. Although I must say, in passing, very few organizations of a grassroots nature do work out a strategic plan, and I think this is a group which does have a commitment to working out an answer to the question of how do we, in fact, how do we in fact think that we can bring about the independent investigation we've been calling for so many years now without success? So there is a need for that strategic plan. And the leaders will be thinking about that now. But we are trying to apply, you mentioned that I've had some business background as well as other things. I think that it's time that we apply some of the principles of strategic planning to grassroots organization. And whatever plans we come up with will be reviewed, revisited, and changed as a result of the input from the rest of this pyramidal but upwardly looking structure that I mentioned. In general, it's clear to me from the experiences I've had in planning that if there isn't broad participation and widespread buy-in into a plan is just a plan that sits on a shelf. Our government ought to know that. They've produced more plans than the Soviet Union, and I don't know how many of them are being implemented. Absolutely, the sooner one gets involved, the more, and the quicker one can have some input into that planning. But even in the history of architects and engineers, we have seen a lot of really imaginative actions and educational initiatives undertaken by local groups with no central direction at all. I was recently shown some information from Portland, Oregon about a study group created at one of the community colleges. And the in-depth coverage which has been made available on that campus should serve as an inspiration to people really all over the country. So maybe that's a meandering answer to your question. The shorter answer would be that we will be developing a preliminary strategic plan, and part of the planning process is to revisit it regularly and broaden it and improve it through the ideas and the input of our base as we build out that base. What's clear is that a small group of people cannot bring about any of the results that we are looking for. It will only be through a broad-scale empowerment and a broad-scale rising to the occasion of anyone who's ever had some flicker of anger that the answers to the questions we raise have been so hard to get, and a resolve by those people to say, I have to do something myself to change this, because if we don't do it as citizens, I think we should look, when we ask who is responsible for 9/11, which we should look in the mirror. We could read Bowling Alone, but at some level, I think we have all allowed this to happen. We can claim ignorance or innocence, and that's maybe true, but we don't need to pour ashes on our head and tear our shirts, but it's clear that we have allowed ourselves to get to a situation in which we can be lied to with impunity. And just going back to that book that you were referring to, Bowling Alone and the Loss of Voluntarism in the Country, as you say, it's not been, or as I said too, it's not been a matter of recent origin, this trend. But in many ways it's worse, because 50 years ago, when people were finding it increasingly difficult to join the Volunteer Firemen's Association in their neighborhood or whatever, at least you had a confidence in the news that you were reading. You may not have been a well-grounded confidence, but you figured that if you read the newspaper, you were pretty well informed, and you could make a reasonable decision when you went to the polling booth. And therefore, the issues that were being laid out before you in an election campaign were the issues. But we know how much concentration of the media has taken place since then, down to 5 or 6. When we can see that a billboard in front of the New York Times won't get their attention to cover something that they're determined not to cover, when you can do, as I did once, march in a procession of about 300,000 or 400,000 people in downtown Manhattan, practically past their building, and see it covered the next day with an article that said that 10,000 people were there, you begin to see that just as our volunteerism has declined, the need for that kind of, for civic organization, for people to be skeptical and to ask and to participate and to talk to one another, has increased very substantially. So let me just add a story from a couple stories from my Peace Corps experience. I think if I had to do it again today, I'm not sure I would join the Peace Corps, but I was very glad that I did many years ago. As I mentioned in the beginning, I learned a lot from the Peruvians. We created a block organization in a poor community that on the outskirts of Lima that they had no running water service, and their local municipality was not together enough that it was likely that they would ever provide such a basic service. So we organized block clubs, following an example, a pilot project that had been developed by a young law student in that community. And we formed block clubs. We had 2 delegates from every block, and they set up a bank savings account program with every resident having a savings account countersigned by their block delegate, and they raised money for water mains. And they created a structure which had never existed there before. Delegates in each block, sector organizations of 10 blocks, and then an intersectoral organization of about 40 or 50 blocks when at the time I left. And this was an area of about 40,000 people surrounded by a larger area. But they got to the point where on Sundays 1,000 people were showing up with picks and shovels to dig deep ditches and install these 12 or 14-inch pipes across about 2 miles of a stretch to reach a well. And all the technical assistance came from experienced mechanics in the neighborhood. We recruited some engineers to help them, to supervise them. And I can tell you that the effect on the community was really much greater than simply the addition of water. And when I went back 30 years later and talked to some of the leaders, and I'll never forget the comment of the man who got elected president. He was a simple carpenter, and he said, even now, I can't figure out how we did what we did.
That is something that I think Peace Corps volunteers, and I can't speak for you, I can only speak for myself, but this is what I came away with, is, first of all, you get a glimpse of just how bad things can go in a society. I was in the former Soviet Union. I was in a country that had been part of putting the first man into space, where they had infrastructure, where they had things at one point, and things had gone wrong, where infrastructure wasn't being rebuilt after things break. A pipe breaks in the street, and here in America, those things happen too, but then they get fixed within a few days. There, it breaks and it breaks, or a manhole cover goes missing, and you better watch out for that manhole if you go walking at night, because it's not, that manhole cover was never replaced, and you can fall into it. Nobody ever fixed it. Toilets just sit there idle. And what got me, and I'll tell a story from my Peace Corps experience, because this all relates to what we've been talking about, bowling alone, loss of civic participation. There were 2 bathrooms at this nonprofit where I used to hang out and that I used to help out a lot. They were both outside, both pit toilets. One was used, and when I say used, I won't go into graphic detail, but used to the point of you would look at this thing and be like, oh, geez, you'd have to really go to want to use this thing. And then the other one was really pristine, really clean. And can you guess why that was? Well, I'll tell you why. Because one had a bathroom door on it, and the other one had the bathroom door fall off or break off several years ago. So everyone is using the one with the door on it to the point where they just stopped maintaining it and it was just nasty. And the other one doesn't get used, so it's like perfectly clean and nice and ideal. So someone was telling me about this bathroom, and then I saw it for myself, and my first question was, why haven't you put a door on this bathroom? And you could see this societal apathy that had set in, where people are just like, why bother? Why do anything? So something that I always tried to stress, because I was a teacher and community organizer, I tried to stress this with my students, is that, okay, the government there is your problem. I wasn't allowed to say that, but essentially it was implied. There's certain things you can't do politically because it's a dictatorship. However, there's certain things you can do in your ordinary life, just everyday small things that you can improve society. If you don't have electricity going into your outhouses, hang a flashlight. Buy a few flashlights, hang them by a rope, and hang it over there, and now you got light in your bathroom. The hospitals were bleak and dreary, so the kids drew pictures and went there one day and just put their pictures up all over the children's section of the hospital, and it made it look nicer and more inviting, and that brings up people's moods. Just small things you can do. And so again, we've seen how bad things can get when people lose their interest in their own society, and it really scares me. And I think that wanting to do anything about the crime of the century, the fact that buildings 1, 2, and 7 were brought down in a controlled demolition, is a terrible sign that America is on this path now. Now, we haven't gotten to the point where manhole covers aren't being replaced and where infrastructure has broken down, but I fear what this could lead to. I've seen how this story ends if we're not careful, and letting them get away with blowing up those buildings is a huge giving in to authority, giving in to sinister people that keep things like this covered up, keep this cover-up going, whatever the motive is, whatever the motive for the cover-up is, and whoever was responsible. You can't let them do that. It's a bad signpost on a road to societal decay and ultimate disaster. So I know that's part of what motivates me. It's what I suspect motivates a lot of people from Peace Corps who get involved in these bigger issues after they get out of it. Now, talking about the structure of the system that you're putting together, are there any groups you're using as inspiration? Anything you're modeling it after, where you've seen it work there? You're going to base this off of?
Well, I think we've got some good examples that date back to the good work of other 9/11 Truth activists who predated my involvement in this. I'm a latecomer. I mentioned the Portland, Oregon group. They've got a proliferation of initiatives going that I don't know if I could do justice to describe them all. One is they're talking with their city council about trying to get them on record as taking a stand. Another important group is and I'm probably going to get crucified for leaving out some others that are as far along or more. So my apologies in advance, but your own records will speak for yourselves as time goes on. But the Dallas organization has been a real inspiration. What they're specifically doing, they've passed out something like 60,000, I think they estimate, DVDs over the past years. So it's not like they're a new group, but under their they've responded to this initiative by undertaking to form more local action groups on their periphery. They're saying, well, we're strong here in the Dallas area, and we've got people coming from around the metropolitan area, but there's a lot of people for whom it's too far to come down here for regular meetings. So let's proliferate. Let's create more local action groups. That means more convenient local meetings, more leaders, more outreach, greater in-depth organizing, and they're also working with their leader to expand out to the other cities of Texas, and I think we'll see great things there, and that's a model that's is being looked at and followed by others around the country.
Now, what do you think is the benefit to having action take place on a local level as opposed to just central command? Is things happening at these grassroots as opposed to you saying, okay, I want everybody to do this and that? Yeah,
well, that I can give not as the best example, but one that I'm familiar with. I've been away from my hometown for a number of months, and I'll be going back in a few weeks. And I was feeling bad that we hadn't created a local action group there. So I've been, we started a little meetup space, and gradually a few people started calling me. And people from my town that I had never met responded to that. And one said, well, I've got a storefront on the main street of our town. Why don't we set up a card table there and do some petitioning? We'll have some people sign the Architects and Engineers petition. And while they're doing that, we'll see if they'd like to attend a meeting where we can show one of our DVDs. And sure enough, now there's 2 or 3 people who are ready to get started on doing that. I think they want me to come, but I'm telling them that I don't need to come for this to happen. But we will do it together, and that will start to reveal the extent within that little upstate New York town of how many people have been aware of this. In fact, one of them just wrote to me today, the cat is out of the bag, she wrote. Everybody knows the story on this. And it certainly reminds one of the story of the emperor and Emperor's New Clothes, right? And I think a good part of what we're after is to help people have the courage to say what they're thinking, and come together in straightforward, common sense American ways of responding to these things. We do have a great political structure. We do have the ability to elect local representatives. It's strange that our representatives are not responding on this issue, but maybe we just haven't gone to them the way other groups go to them, from a position of organization and local power as a constituency. So maybe we have to do a little reflecting as to how it is that we have allowed this gap to develop between ourselves and our political leaders. If we are serious about democracy, it starts with us, and just an inchoate anger at somebody for not doing what you want is not really realistically going to lead to a better result.
Well, what I like about it, and I've talked about this before on the show, is that this takes us out of the realm of the cyber world, where algorithms can block certain pages from coming up, where Facebook decides which friends of yours get to see your post, where everything you talk about and discuss can be watched and planned against, and blocked in some way. When you're having discussions out in the regular world, when you're talking in the park or at a cafe with your friends, that takes it out of that very controlled world and puts it into the world of anarchy. When I say anarchy, I'm not talking about chaos and fire or anything like that, those images that come up in people's minds. I'm talking about out of the controlled matrix where they don't know what you're planning. They don't know that you're necessarily going down to this farmer's market and reaching out to the people there with flyers and petition sign-ups, and perhaps the local congressman is down there talking about something, and you confront him with this issue, or you have a private conversation with him and maybe an invitation to brainstorm a solution. They don't know that you're going to be going down to your local college and speaking with students there and influencing them, and who knows among those students who you're going to be influencing. Maybe it'll be the next Richard Gage. You never know. They can't control that. There's nothing they can do about that. They're not God. They don't control reality. The only reality they control is in the cyber world. So we got to take it out of that, and that's part of what you're doing with this organizational structure.
Very true, Andy. That's really important, and it makes me think of one other point I hadn't brought up before. People tend to get overwhelmed and discouraged about a lot of things these days, but what we're talking about lends itself to a very simple way of measuring success. I did a little chart, which I wish I could claim some patent on this, but it's obvious to anybody who's gotten through high school math, I suppose. You probably all recall what an exponential progression is. If we start with a group of 8 people, as in a formal sense I have with this project, and each of them succeeds in involving one new person to do those 3 simple things I mentioned at the beginning of this program. That is, each of them gets one person per month to come and see an architect's and engineer's DVD about controlled demolition. And if we can get that same person to agree to come back the following month and embark upon this, I still don't know what's a good term for it, I'll call it the civic enterprise of self-education, community education, and civic activity. If each of us gets that one person per month, and that person gets one person per month, in 25 months, the table tells you would have 250 million people organized. Well, if we got 250 million people organized, we'd be stealing kids out of strollers and probably having to drag people from other countries in to meet our quotas. So we're not going to get 250 million people. But the goal is not 250 or even 25 million or even 2.5 million. The goal of this activity is one. For each of us to get one person into that cycle. One person per month. Now, some of us won't get one person per month. If we all did, we would get 250 million people, or we'd be recruiting infants. So we won't get that far. But if we did get one new person per month, we would have organization coming out of our ears. And we would have totally re-educated the country on that matter, and there would be no question about the political will or the power to bring about a new investigation and a change in everything that the chips would fall wherever they would fall. So we think of this as being difficult. You say, well, I'll never get one person a month. Well, you may not if you get active in a local group, but keep in mind that somebody already got 50,000 people to sign this petition. Somebody already got 250,000 people to friend the Architects and Engineers website. 1 million people have downloaded one of the Architects and Engineers DVDs that was posted on Public Broadcasting's PBS's website after the 9/11 Truth Group in Colorado managed to get it on public TV in, I think, Denver in Colorado, which is, by the way, something we should all be trying to do nationwide. It's a very good action project. But that's 1 million people. That's 20 times the number of people who have signed the Architects and Engineers, or who have gotten on its mailing list, probably 50 times the number that have signed the petition. So there are people out there, and we're not starting from scratch. And in that context, to think that starting with a group of 8 and adding one person per month for each of those 8 and spreading that circle out, that you would be talking in the hundreds of millions in 2 years, that should give us some perspective. I'm not saying it'll be 2 years. I don't know how long it'll take, and I certainly am not saying such extravagant numbers. But we can fall far short of that, and we will be doing very well. And yet a goal of 1, that shouldn't be so impossible to think about. We can fall short of that goal. We may get 1 every 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. That's still contributing. That's contributing a lot. If everybody did that 1, we this would be over. So that's a metric. We can keep track of that. What gets measured gets managed. And in a time when we think that we're powerless and we can't make a difference, if we think about our goal being 1, I think we can make a difference.
Absolutely, and I can feel people getting inspired. I can feel them wanting to help. Can you tell our audience, if they want to get involved in this, how they go about doing that?
Sure. Simplest thing is to sign the Architects and Engineers petition. As you look through there, you'll find a brief description of this local action group activity if you click on Take Action, it'll lead you there. You'll see a list of the regional representatives. We actually have a new one, but there's if you look at that, you'll have someone in your region, not necessarily yet in your state, to talk with. There may be a state coordinator in your state already, and if there isn't, we are looking for one, and that person might be you. If you don't want to do it, it doesn't have to be you. We'll find someone else, but you can help us to find that person by just stepping up at whatever level you feel you can do. And everyone should be thinking in terms of whatever unique contributions they can make. I'll just tell one story. She's going to know who she is, but I won't use her name. There's a woman in a small mountain town out west, single mom, a legal secretary. In her day, she spends her day at court, and she started waking up, and now she's volunteering her services as our legal stenographer for our meetings so that we have good minutes. That's very important as you're trying to plan something like we're doing. That's one person's skill. Other people, I've seen, I have to talk about this a little bit too. Having looked at not many people do get to look at this because Architects and Engineers is very jealous about protecting the confidentiality of its subscribers. So I want to make that very clear. But given what I'm doing, he has asked me to look at some of these, and I see the range of offers that have been made in the past. I think Richard Gage and everyone involved with the organization would be the first to admit that we have not made the best use in the past of offers of assistance. And I think what I'm telling you is that we're trying to come up with a structure. It's hard to make good use of offers of assistance when you have a volunteer organization to begin with. We're trying through this structure to find a way to distribute the workload. So if you had in the past, maybe 5 years ago, offered to do something like this, if you said whatever I can do, I'll do, because so many of you have, give this organization another try, because everything I've described in terms of this structure is designed to not let that happen again. If you said that you wanted to help and nobody contacted you, it's because we didn't know how to build something like this. You learn by doing. You do something, and architects and engineers' accomplishments, as I've already outlined, speak volumes about what has been accomplished. And nobody's perfect. The organization isn't perfect. This is one thing that the organization has learned from its experience. We're going back to you. If you volunteered 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and nobody got back to you, you can use that as an excuse not to be involved, but you're not that kind of person. Come back to us and offer again what you offered before. Help us build out this structure. Let's find a way to plug us all back into this system and become what we're capable of being.
Right, and as a nation, we can become capable of so much more, and so much is happening at AE 9/11 Truth. I don't even talk about it, but a lot of things are being made better, and I know everybody out there has something they can bring to the table. Bill talked about the lady recording the minutes for the meetings. There's some talent you got that you can use for this war, and that's the way I look at it, is an information war for the heart and soul of America, for scientific freedom, for the ability to say 2 + 2 = 4, not 5 because the government says so. And Bill, you're right out the front lines of that war. I want to thank you for everything you're doing and for coming on 9/11 Free Fall. It's been fascinating to listen to you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for all you're doing. We'll be working together. Take care.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of the show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.